And welcome back to the second part of Save the Frame, Episode 2. I'm Scott, and that one's Reed. And
I think you meant 0 frames per second, Scott.
Didn't I say 0 frames per second?
State of the frame is what you said.
Wow.
Shame, I know your name.
Oh, man, I'm doing too many episodes. I actually didn't record Save the Frame this week, so that's been a bit on my mind. Just because I want to focus in on getting quality before we do quantity and before we have a viewership. So, 0 frames per second with Reed. I'm Scott, and that one's Reed. And
I'm Reed.
Today we're going to be talking about the state of E3. This is very much pertaining also to Nintendo and NX and their plans for E3. But also, we're approaching E3. We're going to start having more E3 topics or rambles. We're not sure how we'll be splitting those out. It might just kind of depend on the week and what kind of news there is. But let's go ahead and kind of get right into it. So, undeniably, there have at least been a lot of journalists, gaming journalists, going around and, well, I'm just going to say it, fear-mongering. There are conferences that will not be at this E3. EA, Activision, Disney will not be attending E3. Technically, Nintendo is not attending E3. They're just kind of showcasing a game. Right. Or at least that is their declared plan. And so there's this idea that, like, oh man, it's the end of E3, oh my gosh, like, this is so terrible. When if you think about this for, at least, like we will, for more than 3 seconds on this episode, this is no big deal.
No big deal.
Like, so, at the end of the day, there probably will be an end to E3.
Right.
No joke. However, there will always have to be kind of a big event. The reason being for this is, until this is no longer a standard within our industry, which goes well beyond E3, it's all kinds of different conferences, there will always be an E3, is basically the message I think should really be prevalent. Whether it becomes PAX or Gamescom or something, whether Sony just flies a bunch of fans out to a conference that they'll have in New York around the same time that Microsoft will have a conference in, let's say, LA or Texas or someplace, and, then EA does the same thing, and Ubisoft. There is always going to be a need for a cheering, jeering audience at who get hyped around this thing, because that is the idea of E3. That is kind of the idea of gaming within the industry. It's important to have this kind of hype, and to have these videos of loud audiences really getting pumped for announcements. You can, hell, you just see it on YouTube. That is, E3 is not is technically not the purpose of announcements. It's the purpose of audience and ambience. And that's kind of where I want to actually start off, which sounded like a concluding point.
I know. I'm like, oh, and we're done.
All right, and that's been the part 2 of episode 4 or 12 or 2 of 0 frames 16. Per second. So, that rough point to start. I probably shouldn't have been so conclusive, but do you want to pick up, or should I give us more of a pickup point, Reed?
I can keep going. I can take a little bit. Yeah, I agree. There will always need to be something, right? So, clearly, you're not just going to announce something to... So, sidetrack. Mm-hmm. Backtrack. You are going to always need a platform to announce something, right? Clearly, some companies are doing this to the beat of their own drum. Actually, all the companies technically are doing this to the beat of their own drum. You saw this with Sony when they did or Microsoft rather, when they originally released the Xbox One. They didn't do that at E3.
Sony did that too. They just didn't show the PS4.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then Nintendo has been doing their Nintendo
Directs. And it should also be noted that this is also healthier for the companies because they don't have to spend all this money to get everything in one place while everybody else is trying to get everything in one place, and that screws up plans because somebody else is moving in that time slot. And the arguments there are strong arguments against E3. I mean, that's undeniable. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I'm just listening, man. Yeah, no, I think eventually you're right. I think E3 is just too expensive, right? So
it's also in an expensive city. LA is not cheap.
LA is not cheap, no, and it's covered in smog. I like LA, but I don't love LA. If you want to know what my opinion on LA is,
everybody wants to know your opinion on LA.
Right. So
all right, so obviously I've gotten us stuck in a rut. So let's backtrack and let's actually look at why this is scary and why this can also be shut down. So EA is big. I mean, obviously they are one of the biggest names in gaming, and also financially, like they are typically second in place next to Activision Blizzard, and. So there is a lot of issue with, like the idea of EA steps out of this and says we're not going to have a conference this year. That's really where it all started. And people were just kind of like, oh, well, yeah, this is reminiscent of why E3 eventually will not be a thing. And then, of course, Activision was at least reported. It wasn't long before EA's chief, and I'm reading this from Wired, an article where they kind of fearmonger. It's the end of E3 as we know it. Come on, guys.
Well, I mean, technically, it is the end of E3 as we know it, right?
Is it? I think that's...
EA is not there. Nintendo is only going to have one game, maybe even not a direct. I mean, I would agree that it's the end of E3 as we currently know it. Doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of E3.
That's a really good point, but I want to return to that, so let's put a pin in it. So, it wasn't long before EA's chief rival Activision said it. I completely misread that sentence. It wasn't long before EA's chief rival Activision said it too, was bailing. Then VentureBeat reported that Wargaming, which makes World of Tanks, would bow out, as well as Disney, which I can also do one of these at. One can be dismissed as a fluke, blah, blah, blah. So, Disney being a big name would obviously raise concern.
Dude, they've been killing it with their Infinity games, or whatever they're called.
Yes. However, okay, so I'm just going to get right into my point.
Dude, get it.
What else do they have?
Kingdom Hearts, man.
No, they don't. That's Square's.
And Disney, it's a collaboration.
It's a collaboration, but Disney can... Alright, so Square owns the IP. It is Square's IP with Disney in collaboration. And then World of Tanks only has... World of Tanks. And then...
Yeah, I'll give you the World of Tanks.
And then you look at... So, Activision and EA are really the big questions here. And I think this can also be viewed, and as you said, through a lens of E3 as we know it. Or as Bethesda. To be 100% honest, when Ubisoft's conferences aren't completely awkward... EA typically has the worst conference. They spend too much time on sports. They'll bring out like a singer. They'll do kind of an awkward showcase of a game that nobody is really interested in. And this might be
Peggle 2.
Yeah, and this might be them.
Peggle 2!
This might be them finally realizing it and saying, if we just wait for when games are ready, then maybe we'll actually have the best conference next year. Or maybe this isn't them bowing out of E3 altogether. maybe this is just them bowing out of a conference. Bethesda has shown us games plenty of times at E3 without having a conference. And so has technically EA and Activision. They have not had to have conferences to share games with us at Sony's and Microsoft's conference. And this is kind of important too, because that means that, again, this becomes on the consumer schedule, not on the conference holder. You have to view their content in the actual conference to understand the context instead of these kind of breakout videos. Or if you're, then you're stuck waiting for when it posts on YouTube or to IGN or GameSpot or some particular site. I think that, again, we can also look at Nintendo. Yeah, fine, Nintendo hasn't been having conferences, but what have they really had to have conferences for? Everything about them has kind of revolved around them. So they have this trouble with third-party content. So really Nintendo is the only thing they can do. And yes, that does mean less time to be consumed by E3. Uh-oh, am I losing you? We were getting the red box of doom, as we'll refer to it. Alright, well, it has passed. And so there's a lot to unpack in there, I feel, and I'm a bit concerned that you're not saying anything or interrupting me.
I'm just listening / not sure if it's good, the internet connection. But
we actually want you to talk on this episode, Reed.
Nah, I'm just going to listen.
Son of a bitch!
I'm just going to sit in and I'm going to listen. No, I'm just kidding. So, there is a lot to unpack, right? Just because I don't know, right? No one really knows what the future is going to hold. Bethesda, I thought you were going to hit something else with Bethesda. Bethesda had a conference last year where a lot of people believe they won E3, mainly due to the fact that almost all of their games were going to be released in a
ignore the red bar of doom.
Ignore the red bar of doom. Almost all of their games were going to be released within the next 24 months. And I think that's the new model. I think people have kind of realized that this extensive marketing hype that you saw with the first Battlefront, that
when they marketed Mass Effect, they didn't show anything.
And I think that's a part of this new strategy where it's coming. Mass Effect's coming. A Battlefield is going to be coming. But I think they're going to be a little bit more cautious on what they show. Because Bethesda showed them last year that... Yeah, exactly. And that real hype is generated when you release a trailer or you show something, you say, all right, this is going to be ready in 4 months. And I think that wasn't necessarily true in the E3s that passed, right? So in the E3s that passed, a lot of companies got out there and said that we're releasing this game, and they wouldn't say when. And so you'd have this incredible speculation for years at a time with some games. Look at Final Fantasy 15.
Oh God, yeah,
exactly.
And you can also you can look at that with Mass Effect and how you can compare that to Fallout 4 and how little speculation there was. And I gotta ask, do you think that? And I don't think this is what they're doing, but do you think that has something to do with the NX? Not being at E3, not being a part of this.
The hopeless, lovely optimist in me says, hell yeah, it is. The realist in me is probably saying it's more due to the fact that everyone kind of wants to be that Instagram girl that I hinted at in the last podcast. So if you missed that, go back and rewatch that. Everyone wants to be, look at me. You bring an amalgamation of different studios, different companies at E3, which is awesome in the sense that it gives individuals a sense of excitement, right? You generate hype.
There is a really good point there.
But there isn't this singling out of each individual company, each individual corporation. And the first company to realize that was Nintendo. That's why they started doing the directs. That's why they started backing away from their...
I don't know if the directs outside of E3, I can agree with. So, but when they're doing... So, like, the point you kind of hit on, and I'm not entirely sure you noticed that you hit on this. So you mentioned that E3, companies want to have their individual thing to have hype, right. But E3 is this time where like everything is stacked on top of each other. So like you could announce like the new God of War, and it's even overlapped by something Sony is doing in itself, The Last of Us, and it's just like there is right. Definitely something in there, but Nintendo still does their direct during E3, which is kind of like. Well, okay, yeah, you do directs outside of E3, but this one's also during E3.
It's not necessarily... They just show off whatever they have to show off at E3, right? Like, it's not necessary... It's catered to E3 in the sense that it's during that time and they want to create some sense of hype, but there have been bigger announcements in directs that are just, like, in August, right? Like, I think the new Nintendo 3DS was released, or like they first started talking about it like in August direct, and it's just like, oh hey, we got a new system coming out, and people are like, wait, what?
Yeah.
But I think other companies are taking that model and probably doing it a slightly better way. I think they've realized that, kind of like what you and I are discussing, E3 is about everything. And these companies might want it just to be about them.
Well, I can't help but circle back to basically that, yes, you want it to be about you, your product, but at the same time, you look at, so like comparing how, information is released, you look at how a game trailer goes up on... Let's go with Polygon, because I've been saying GameSpot and IGN a lot. And then, of course, GameSpot and IGN reiterate what Polygon showed, because they had an exclusive. And it's picked apart more than it is just like, yes, there's an audience in front of this and they're fucking hyped. There is still this importance to that, displaying the hype. But there is also all this filler, too, where it's just like, well, now we have to show you a game that nobody's really going to cheer for. They're just kind of like, cool, get to the next big golf announcement. Clap. Yeah, like, it's...
The Dumbledore golf clap.
Yeah.
Do you know what that is?
No.
In Harry Potter, in the first movie, this is Dumbledore's clap. That's it. And that's what people do at E3. Sorry. You like to add a little inside.
I'm going to end the show, guys, permanently.
Yeah, feel free to.
Anyway, so, yeah, I think there's... there are things about E3 that are just entirely necessary. You can also even reflect on how the press just gets the shit beat out of them. They go to they have to fly to this event first, which is, just a pain in the ass itself because, jet lag. And then you have to run around on the show floor, talk to all these people, and you're not really playing things because you're spending too much time talking, and, you're talking to people, they're displaying games, and, kind of even in their minds, all these things are getting overlapped, and you can't really pick apart these things and really analyze them. And crap, there was something important in there that I just blanked on.
People are sent out there. People are running around with their chicken head.
Basically, yeah, like, there is kind of this excitement and fervor and display for these games that also helps to build the hype. But in the same hand, a lot of these personalities we rely on to reciprocate this information to us. Also, they get run down. Some say it's, they dread the event until it's there, and then they enjoy it, and then they're just like, oh, God, next year. And, there's something to be said about that, too. But no matter what, this thing still needs to be there, because we see there only seem to be really two sides of this. You either release it into the press either find out about it and release it into the wilds, or you go to a big event where there's actually crowds that are really pumped for these things and display that, and that is then displayed through YouTube and other sources for people to enjoy. And displaying excitement is important, as opposed to just, here is the thing, hope you guys enjoy, and instead on YouTube you get, like, within the first hour, 500 likes but 300 dislikes, because people are only looking at the surface of what you just showed, not what's underneath, not, you might have had a closed beta, and the people who were in the closed beta were like, I totally get it, like, this is awesome, but the people who were on the outside don't have a clue, and, they're the thumbs down. There is this kind of atmosphere that these developers are not even the developers, but like they just kind of announced that, like, hey, we're not going to be at E3, and the press looks at that and it's just like, it's the death of E3 again. And I'm sure we've got, I think, 4 years in between us.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
And you were probably really coming into E3 during that time where
it was Christmas, dude. It was just straight. People got swag.
But do you remember that point where there was that one year where it was just like nothing? It was like a ghost town. There were like a few booths, and there were like 3 conferences, and there was like nothing big out of it. Do you remember that one?
Was it the year that was this? Okay, so was this in the last console generation where?
I think it was just at the very beginning of PS3 and 360, if I'm correct.
Mm-hmm. And I think Nintendo came out, and their big thing was Wii Music.
Yeah, I think that was it. I think that was the one.
Was it that one?
Yeah, and like it was more about how like E3 is dead and it's a ghost town, as opposed to like the actual announcements, but nobody was announcing anything. And I can't help but think that, like, there is this fear that returns.
Right.
However, in the same hand, it's just like, we just had PAX East, and there were some pretty
Which
big
I should have gone to, dude. I had no idea it was that weekend.
That's right, you're in Boston.
It's in Boston.
I keep forgetting that. I keep forgetting that. You should have gone to it.
Oh, man.
And you're not a fan, right? You're not a fan of Borderlands?
Oh, no. I mean, it's all right. It's not my favorite.
But they announced Borderlands 3, which was actually huge. In fact, it kind of even overshadowed the things they talked about. No, they didn't. They just talked about how there will be Battleborn or Borderlands Easter eggs in Battleborn in the DLC. But, the announcement of Borderlands kind of overshadowed their discussion of Battleborn in that conference, or I guess their little kind of seminar. They were just really kind of talking about the development process. But actually, why, I am curious, what doesn't get you hyped about Borderlands? Although you said you didn't play the second one.
Yeah, I didn't play the second one. I just played the first, and I don't know, it just wasn't that interesting to me. But
well, yeah, the first.
That's cool that Pat. Yeah, go ahead.
No.
Well, I was gonna say, it's cool that that's coming out of PAX, because I was actually I thought we were gonna get at there, and what I kind of want to get at is that I feel like even if you lose something like E3, you still are gonna have things like PAX around, just because. You need conventions to release the games, or at least show the games off to fans. And I think PAX is really great venue to do that at.
I do think
Really wish I had gone. Really wish I had gone.
Yeah, I didn't realize I completely neglected the year in Boston, and
I know, me too.
I completely neglected where I live, and
I know.
I do think PAX is a bit more about community, but again, I can't help but circle back to, and it keeps circling back to this idea of, like, there is something almost crucial to being at E3, like, and maybe that is most crucial to Sony and Xbox, because they have this thing where it's just like, Christmas is coming, and it's just like,
right.
this could be all of your gifts, and
you dress up as Santa,
and you circle back to what EA has had in past years, and they showed some concept art for fucking Mass Effect Andromeda.
Dude, that was brutal.
And I even look at Ubisoft, and I gotta ask, like, where's your head at on Ubisoft conferences? Because typically I don't actually find them often enjoyable.
I love them. I love them because of how painfully awkward they are.
I feel like that's part of the problem at large, is how awkward they can feel. Like, just not only.
But I love that, dude. Like, they're trying to make something work that just, like, is clearly not working.
Is that a good thing?
I mean, it's funny, but I do think they get to show off some of their product. I've kind of lost faith in Ubisoft for, like, the past few years. They just really haven't been delivering on the quality, except for Rainbow Six Siege, which, buy it or, like, find it, dude. That was, like, an amazing shooter. I love that. I got it for a discount. Anyway,
I've heard great things about Rainbow Siege. I was even reflecting on Square in there as you were talking about it, because we were talking about awkwardness, and Square had a conference last year, and that was awkward as hell.
Painful.
And I even think about Square's presence this year, and like, they could come out tomorrow and be like, we're not going to have a conference. And of course there would be those that'd be like, it's the end! And I would be like, what the fuck would they even show? Kingdom Hearts. Okay.
Dude, they're going to announce a release date this year, and people are going to lose their minds.
You think?
Nope.
I do feel like Kingdom Hearts would overshadow Final Fantasy 15, like 100%. I feel like the Kingdom Hearts audience is more hyped for Kingdom Hearts 3 than Final Fantasy 15, and that's a bigger audience.
Because they're wary about Final Fantasy 15.
Exactly.
Right?
But if you take part of that mind share away to be like, well, I only have, like, I have a budget, and, like, there's only so much I'm going to invest in this year, and yeah, if you take, I think it would be bad, unless it was next year, unless they were just like, it's next year. Then that's fine. But if they said it's the end of this year, then that's a problem.
No, I definitely don't think they're releasing at the end of this year. There's no way. There's no way they can get that out by the end of this year.
Well,
I think they're going to say the end of next year, for sure, for Kingdom Hearts.
I think some of it depends on how big the teams are. If they were split teams, where Final Fantasy 15's team is Final Fantasy 15's team, and
right.
Kingdom Hearts.
I think they were, because they have the same director.
Same director, but maybe not the same
Tetsuya Nomura. No, I'm going to butcher that. It's going to be bad.
Tetsuya Nomura is the
proper
pronunciation. But man, that's well,
because I think what's going to happen is Square is just going to assume, all right, so Final Fantasy 15 comes out this year, and then the whole team's going to jump on board of Kingdom Hearts. And that's going to be out by next year.
Yeah, they push it for next year. Yeah, it would. Mm-hmm. It would probably be next year. I think you just don't want to kill any hype that was built from the Final Fantasy 15 event. Have you had the opportunity to watch any of that?
Yeah, I did get a chance to watch that after we parlayed about it. It was cool. I mean, it's definitely being treated as like, it almost is like an
event in and of itself, its release, because there's an anime and a movie.
Yeah, it's almost. Yeah, I don't really know how to word it. It's less a video game than. Yeah, I guess an event is a great word.
A digital entertainment event because of everything. They
Right.
really circled
it's
the wagons.
It's a little bizarre how much they're throwing into this. I mean, I understand, right? Like it's Final Fantasy. They want this one to succeed.
Yeah.
Clearly, obviously, but it's like pretty intense how much stuff they're throwing at this one.
And there's also something that we could reflect on in there. What they did with the Final Fantasy event. Right. How that could translate to E3, because you have, again, I return to this awkwardness where it's just like, okay, here's a fucking game to get hyped about, and then here's like a bunch of indie titles, which is fine.
Then here's another game.
Yeah, well, you know, like the indie titles I think are fine, but at the same time, it's just like, I think even the people who play indie titles recognize it's just like, that is the filler. Like,
right.
and so it's just like, here's the game, here's the filler.
Well, it kind of depends on the indie game, right?
It does.
Like, No Man's Sky can definitely hold its own.
Yeah, and they you know, like they see that hype around, you know, like those kind of indie titles, and then they start to highlight them. Right. But there's still this kind of like showcase of just like, here's a bunch of snippets, and here's, you know, like some stuff that's coming with Move, and you know, like, and I'm sure there will even be a VR segment where it's just like, here's a couple minutes of VR, like people looking around. I love
this. This is like you're dancing, man.
And
this is like.
Well, that's like how it feels, where it's just like...
It kind of is.
It's just like people being excited on screen, like Randy Marsh.
Or like the Kinect one. Did you remember the Kinectimal? I don't know if you know.
Yeah.
The Kinectimals, where there's that little girl, and she was just like going like this, and everyone on the internet felt immediately really weird for watching E3. They're like, I'm too old for this.
Yeah, and...
I'm too old to be a part of video games.
And I can't help but wonder if maybe, like, EA could come back and be like, we've got Mass Effect Andromeda, and you know what? That's all you need to know about. Like, and it's, like, Mass Effect Andromeda is probably out within the first 2 quarters of next year.
I'm going to say it's out, like, probably March. My guess. March.
So there's really, no need to... Oh, man. Unless that's on NX, that would be...
I wouldn't be surprised if it is.
I want it to be.
The Mass Effect 3 was on the Wii U.
It was, yeah. But they really need that third-party support. Anyway, if for some reason it isn't out before E3 next year, and it comes out in October, November, they should just do a Mass Effect event at E3. Like, I think...
Treat it like Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, like...
Pamper it.
You could almost...
Create a car for it.
You could almost call the Bethesda event a Fallout 4 event with some Bethesda compliments of Dishonored and...
Doom.
And they did Fable, and they did do Doom, and Doom was good. But basically, just have almost like a series of almost like movie trailers with games, and then lead into the big thing where that is what you focus on. And there's actually, I almost think from this some room for E3 to just grow and evolve, as opposed to dying and waning.
I think you hit a big point there. I think so. You could, of course, it could go either way, and perhaps maybe I even alluded to that it might be dying earlier. But I do think that evolution is probably. I'm going to be a revisionist if I already said that, and say that I think you're just seeing the evolution of E3. I think that's a very.
It's a much smarter way to approach it, because, you know, especially going into this coming Great Scott Marcus episode where I'm gonna just go off on people being like, YouTube is dying. It's just like, this thing just like was born. Like, dude, does it have the cancer? And
I shouldn't have laughed. That was bad.
We're all. It's okay. It's okay. I have a table reserved at hell. You've got a seat. It's fine.
Satan's gonna be like, welcome.
I've been waiting for you.
I know. I'm gonna be like, yep. All right.
And Yeah, like I don't see why E3 just has to straight out die as much as just evolve and be like, oh, you don't want to attend? That's just fine. You know, like, kind of funny, last year did Cross GameSpot where they covered all this content for, what is it, 5 days worth, 3 days worth? They just sat there at their own kind of little expo.
I think it's like 3 days, right? June 5th through 8th?
Well, the first 2 days are just conferences, and then the show floor opens up. So, like...
It's like a week.
It's like a week. You even look at what GameSpot and Kind of Funny and IGN are doing, and they have their own kind of spot where they just sit and talk about the things going on and interview people. And there have always been interviews, but those are almost becoming the larger like happenings where it's just like they're the ones talking. I want to listen to them. I don't want to listen to.
Well, and it's also more personal, right? Like you're showing off something that was teased. So you'd have Fallout 4. I think so that was a great example last year, right? So you teased Fallout 4, and then you bring it onto the show floor. You actually say, "All right, this is more personal. This is a more personal thing. Here's how the game actually runs in your hands." So I think you need both, right? Like, and I think that was an evolution that I don't think people necessarily were like, "Oh, E3 is dying." E3 is changing. And you're gonna have changes this year. You have changes this year that are, some might say, are the death of E3, and I think that was a very astute observation that it's merely an evolution of.
Well, you know, it's very easy to be a pessimist on the internet these days, and I feel like...
As if we're not pessimists. No.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, here we are analyzing even our thoughts, breaking them down instead of just being like, no, this is my opinion, this is a YouTube comment.
You should be a psychologist, Scott.
Just gonna,
That's what psychologists do.
Be angry. I don't want to. I've never been a fan of just lumping people into groups, but you even bring up Fallout 4, and even by the end of E3, we saw how Fallout 4 even evolved, where it was just, this is the gameplay we showed you on the first day, and here's different gameplay. We're not just showing you the same demo. And
because it was complete, it was done, right? Like it was that, and that was the strength of Fallout. I honestly think Fallout 4 was kind of a game changer for E3, because other developers saw that this whole, minus Nintendo, because I guess they didn't get the picture, that they can't just be like, hey, this game is coming out, and then everyone gets like really excited and like, in like 3 years, and it's like, no, that's...
See you in a decade.
That's done now. Like, I hope it's done now, because clearly what Bethesda did with Fallout 4, it worked. They were like, hey, this is out. And then people are like, when? This year. 3 months. You know what I mean? Just wait. Exactly. And people went insane. They went bonkers. They couldn't get enough. They were grabbing onto that. And if you
they wanted every string they could tug on to see more of the game.
And if you're smart at marketing, you're just going to be like, that worked. Sure, not every game's a Fallout 4 that has like that gravitas, that sort of pedigree where everyone will be immediately excited, but
well,
I think
there will always
that's got to be the way now.
There will always be delays. I mean, you look at how many delays Uncharted 4 got; it was like 3 of them, and that's gonna happen. But I think yes, I even said this 2 years back, where it was just like we're gonna start to see a push into not even announcing that your game might not even exist, or you might announce that the game exists and see you when it's near done. You know, because it's just these delays are a pain in the ass. You probably even lose consumers off it, because it's just like, well, I was excited and now I'm not excited, and now I'm not even paying attention to when it's coming out.
Right. So you used the Uncharted, which is a great example. I didn't even remember it was out. Like I thought it was out like I thought it was out in June.
Yeah.
And then everyone's like, "Oh my god, some some copies were stolen, and I was like, "What? They
There,
did that in like pre-development, and then it's like, no, it's out like in 2 weeks." I'm like, "What?"
yeah,
I had no
Amazon
idea.
UK already started shipping them, and
Right, exactly.
it's fascinating, and I'm glad we actually broke this down like this because it's easy to fall into these negative stigmas, but it's just like, what did EA really have to show? What did World of fucking Tanks really have to show? Like,
Universe of tanks,
Universe of Tanks.
galaxy of tanks.
They don't even use spaceships. They just launch tanks into space, and then the tank has to like fire a couple shots, and then it's useless.
Yeah, pretty much, dude.
So Reed's got to get going soon. So, but I feel like what we got to here has been some really, good concepts when it comes to E3, and yeah. Did you have any other wrap up points, Reed? Because I think we had some great
I
wrap up
think
points.
you killed it in the sense that you said evolution, and I think that's the takeaway. It's not death; it's evolution.
And we even looked at that through the lens of other conferences we've seen and why they've done poorly and why others have done well, and how that can apply to this important centrifugal point in our gaming years. And yeah,
Yeah, man.
I've been Scott.
Good luck.
That one's been Reed, and we're still working on quality things. So when it comes to these kind of episodes that some of our viewers might come back to, we don't have our Twitters yet. We're gonna work on the Twitter thing next, and continue to work on the quality management. But yeah, like, subscribe, share. You guys know how I don't like to say that, but in this early stage, it does mean a lot to us. Thank you.
Bye.